Okay, hello, welcome back to my channel. It has been a while since I filmed. This is take 2 of this video because my battery died when I tried filming earlier. But it is a Sunday afternoon. It is Sunday, July 3rd, so it is the holiday weekend for me. I have a 4-day weekend, so no time constraints, totally cool. I had taken a break from doing content for a while, and I'm really excited to get back into creating content. I know I've said that before, but there was a reason why I was off, and I'm going to talk about that. But as you've guessed from the title of this video, we're pregnant! Oh, is it going to do it? There we go. I'm not like keeping these as keepsakes, I just hadn't gotten around to throwing them away yet. We are pregnant. We are at 18 weeks. We have a baby girl who will be joining us at the beginning of December. So I'm very excited that we were going to have a little Christmas baby because I love the holidays already, and then just to have the baby and to also not be massively pregnant at Christmas is gonna be really, really excited. Like I'm so excited. I cannot wait for like the place to be all decorated and cheery and for the baby to be here. And I know that we're gonna be exhausted because it's exhausting having a newborn. But I think it's just gonna be a very magical time, hopefully. That, or we'll just use the holidays to rest up. But yeah, we're having a little baby girl. This video is gonna mostly just be me chatting through a few things. I mostly wanted to talk a bit about my experience with the first trimester. I'm not gonna do a dedicated first trimester video, so this is kind of it. But in addition to talking the first trimester, I really wanted to talk about my experience having the NIPTS test, which is the non-invasive prenatal screening test, NIPTS, NIPTS. And it is a very common one. I think most people get it. It's recommended for a lot of people. And it screens for certain genetic abnormalities, like really common things that can go wrong, really common things that people can be at high risk for, either because, you know, you're older or just it happens in general. So kind of like the really big ones like Down syndrome, it's screening for your likelihood for things like that. But I'm going to talk about that and my experience with that, and I'm going to talk my first trimester, and then other stories and other things as we go I will do in other videos, but I decided to combine those into one video because my experience with the NIPTS ended up creating a delay in when we announced and told people. So my original plan for how I was going to tell people is not really how things panned out. And that's okay. There's a lot of things that are out of your control. And this is what we're gonna do instead. So, getting to my first trimester. I found out at about 4 weeks is when I took my test. I took one, and then later in the day I took another, just to be sure. And I have like a bit of a cute story for how I told Simone that we were pregnant, and instead of telling that on YouTube, I'm going to put that in the blog post that goes with this. So if you would like to know that story, I will put the link below and you can go check that out. But we found out around 4 weeks, and those first couple of weeks I felt fine. Like, I probably found out around the beginning of week 4, and if you are unfamiliar, you start counting your pregnancy from like the first day of your last cycle, or your last period. So if you miss a period, when you miss a period, or when you've like hit the point where you can test to find out if you are pregnant, and I knew right away because I'd been tracking and we'd been trying. We hadn't been trying for too long, so we did get kind of lucky that we got pregnant pretty fast. But I'd already been tracking and knowing, so that's one of the reasons I took a test and I knew and was able to find out so early. But yeah, a lot of people don't find out until like they're 4, 6+ weeks along. So we were 4, which is pretty early to find out. Week 4 and 5, I felt fine. I didn't feel any different really at all. It was just excitement. It was like extra exciting because that was a time period where it was exciting, and it was also just something that just the two of us really knew. I did tell like my mom and my best friend and my sister, which was kind of funny because it was just like, oh, I think I'm pregnant. They're like, oh, why do you think you're pregnant? I'm like, well, because I took 2 pregnancy tests and they said I'm pregnant. And that was really just kind of like a nice little period where we got to be the two of us, a little bit of a secret, just kind of like exciting for us. And then I'd say halfway through or towards the end of week 5, I started to get some like light nausea, and it was a bit more of a, am I nauseous? Am I hungry? I'm not sure. I'd started to have some food aversions by then too. Like the beginning of that week, I was fine and I was eating normal. And then around halfway through that week, it was an absolutely not. Like all of a sudden, like foods that I loved, I suddenly had no desire to eat, or the idea of eating them started to sound really bad. And like coffee, I went off coffee. Like I love coffee and I love the like routine of getting up and having a cup of coffee or that hot beverage. It doesn't have to be coffee. Sometimes I do hot water. But I love that like coziness of like a hot beverage in the morning, particularly in like fall, winter, spring. And yeah, not only did I go off coffee where I didn't even want decaf coffee, I went off all hot beverages. Like very quickly, I went from feeling fine to not being able to stomach any hot beverage. No coffee, no teas, not even hot water. Everything I drank had to be chilled. So it was either water that we just like kept in the fridge, like a water bottle that I'd put in the fridge, or like lemonade was one that I could drink during my first trimester. Occasionally I would drink ginger ale, but only if I'd like let it sit for a bit, because super bubbly drinks were also not sitting well for me. So I would say I mostly just drank a lot of ice water. Ice water was like my thing during my first trimester. And then, yeah, by the end of the 5th week, beginning of the 6th week, I'd had full-on morning sickness where I just felt nauseous all the time. I felt ill all the time. It was really, really difficult. Especially like one of those first weeks, I would say like parts of week 6 and week 7, I'd have days where I needed to nap in the middle of the day. All I could eat was saltines or crackers. I was really, really struggling. And then I'd have like a day where I could eat a bit more normal, and it was all over the map. It was really, really hard. I tried a couple different things too to help with the nausea. My doctor prescribed me some medications and some recommended over-the-counter ones too to help with nausea, and all of them made it worse. So none of those worked for me. And I also tried one of those like bracelets that people get for motion sickness and morning sickness and pregnancy, and other people whose first trimester videos I'd followed who'd used those had like raved about them, and it did not work for me either. So I just had to suffer through it. I made it through, but it was really, really hard. And we did our very first scan at 8 weeks. So that was the first time we got to hear the heartbeat and see our little baby on the ultrasound. It's too early to see the sex then. It literally, it's just like, it's a little bean. It's so small at that point. Just kind of mind-blowing. But it was such a fun moment. And then we actually traveled to France right after that, because we'd already had a trip planned to go to France to visit Simone's family. And it if I could do it again, now there's no way to have known that that was going to happen because we, bought our tickets and planned our trip to France well before I had gotten pregnant. So it just ended up working out this way. If I could somehow magically do it over, I would travel during my second trimester, because traveling during my first trimester was really, really rough. That was like the roughest plane rides I've ever had. I normally do not throw up while traveling. I managed to go my entire life without puking in a car or an airplane until I was pregnant. And then it was every time it was bad. It got real bad. And I was tired and I felt ill and miserable, and having the distraction of the trip was nice sometimes, but it wasn't quite enough to like make me not really feel it as like, I still felt sick most of the time. I'd have like windows of time where I felt better, but I still felt sick most of the time. And I was still having trouble with eating, where like one minute I could eat something and then suddenly I couldn't, which is, hard enough at home, but even harder when you're traveling. That was really difficult. So it was not ideal. We made it through, obviously. I wish that I would have been feeling better on that trip, and I think I would have been a much more pleasant person to be around during that trip. Like, I tried, but I just was feeling awful the majority of the time. And then I was trying to like take photos and film stuff and make it look like I was feeling fine so that I could put stuff up on Instagram, because I haven't been very, very much up on social since getting pregnant. A lot because I was feeling really ill and I just could not get the energy to do it. So I was trying really hard, and I wanted to make sure that we had like photos from our trip, because it was the first time we got to travel internationally and go back to see his family since the pandemic. It was my first time staying at his parents' place, actually, because pandemic. And it just, I wanted to have some photos and document it, but I didn't necessarily want those photos to be showing me looking nauseous and miserable the entire time. So I was trying really hard to like really look put together and great during photos. And it was an ordeal for sure. Like, I knew that morning sickness can be bad, but I didn't throw up every day. I know some people have it even worse. But I did not anticipate how ill I would feel all day, every day for weeks on end. The other thing I did not know, like I knew that, obviously your boobs get bigger during pregnancy. That is a well-known thing. I knew that happened. I didn't know it happened so fast. Like, it happened in like week 5 or 6 or something. All of a sudden they started getting bigger, and like they hurt. Like, that's actually something that a lot of people have when they know that they're pregnant, is the fact that their boobs start hurting because they're getting ready. But I don't know. It never occurred to me that it happened so fast and so rapidly. And Simone was like, I think your boobs are bigger. And I was just like, no, it's too early for that. And I was like, no, actually they are. You're right. You well spotted. I didn't know that was a thing that happened so fast. So that was a surprise in my first trimester. But that's pretty much the highlights of my first trimester. There was not a whole lot of things that helped me. I mostly just had to muddle through and try to be flexible, be gracious with myself, go to bed early, take naps when I needed it. Luckily I worked from home, so I didn't have to try to be like smiling and hiding everything in an office. I could just be miserable at home. And I mean, if there's one thing that I found really helpful that I ended up doing, it was getting those puke bags from airplanes, just keeping one in my purse for emergencies. I keep them in the cars for emergencies. Eating a lot of like small meals frequently. So I think like I'd have to eat a really small amount of food, but I would eat like every few hours. And that is really weird for me because I'm not really a snacker, or I wasn't really a snacker until I was pregnant. But those are the two things that I would say helped me the most. Not sure how helpful that is for other people, but if you get really bad morning sickness and nausea in your first trimester and nothing else seems to be helping, medication isn't helping, nothing like that, then that is what helped me. Small meals, usually fairly bland, crackers were my friend, and just frequently. When I found something that was easy on my stomach, yogurt was easy on my stomach. I ate so much yogurt. I still eat a lot of yogurt. And fruit, yogurt, crackers. And then trying to make sure that I had at least like one real meal that wasn't crackers, because I think having like the protein or the energy from actual nutrition helps. Thank God for prenatal vitamins, because otherwise I would have been getting like not nearly what I should be in my system during that first trimester. I felt symptoms pretty much through week 13. I think week 14, I would occasionally get a little wave of nausea, like maybe once a day or so, or if I accidentally went too long without eating. But in general, I would say by week 14, I could eat a lot more normal. I wasn't waking, my energy levels were a lot better. I was not waking up feeling nauseous. The urge to throw up had completely gone away, and I was just starting to feel a lot more human again. But we did our week 12 scan when we got back, so I got to listen to the heartbeat again, and that is when we did the blood draws for the NIPTS. So now I'm going to talk about our NIPTS test. My experience with the NIPTS was not great. It is a very common test. It does a great job of just getting some information up here because I don't miss something. It did a great job for things like Down syndrome. It's really accurate for that. There's a whole lot of other things that it is much less accurate for. Doing blood draws isn't a big deal to me. It's just, I don't really have a problem with needles, so having the actual test done or getting the sample to have the test done was not a big deal. We did that at 12 weeks, and then at 13 weeks, because it takes a while to get the results, we'd gotten a call from our doctor saying that for a lot of the big things that they're looking for, like Down syndrome, it was negative. Everything was fine. However, we did test high risk for monocyte X, which is very commonly referred to as Turner's. Like, it's monocyte X when they are a fetus, basically, and then once they're like a newborn baby, I think you officially refer to it as Turner syndrome. It only affects females where there is only one sex chromosome. You only have one X, so instead of having the two X's, hey Wilma, and having an X or a Y, you only have the one, and that causes a lot of issues. I'd never heard of it before until my doctor had called and told us that we had been flagged as high risk. The NIPTS could only find one chromosome. So we talked to the doctor for a little bit. We started working with a genetic specialist, because the only way to know for sure, the NIPTS test for these things, they are not a diagnosis. They are just flagging it. The only way to actually diagnose this is to have an amniocentesis, which is when they take a sample of the amniotic fluid, using a needle through your abdomen, and test that. Because when they test the blood, it's a combination of the mom's blood and the baby's chromosomes. Like, all those DNA's parts are kind of mixed together, and I have no idea how they know what's what, because that is not my job. Beyond me how they do that. But there are certain things where it's because of that can cause false positives. And with the amniocentesis, it is just going to have the baby's DNA, so it is a lot more accurate for certain things that are less common. So while the NIPTS is pretty accurate for Down syndrome, when it comes to something really rare like Turner syndrome, which is very, very rare, the amniocentesis is much more accurate. So I'm going to throw some stats at you. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a genetic specialist, but this is what I learned or was told by my genetic specialist that we worked with. Because obviously we got the news of 13 weeks. It was very, very upsetting because one, you don't want to hear that anything's wrong with your baby. That is always scary. And two, I'd never heard of Turner's. The more I started looking at it, the more scary it seemed. And three, just the survival rate of fetuses that have been flagged for Turner's is very, very, very low. It's like 99% of fetuses affected with monocycle X end in miscarriage or stillbirth. So that is a stat that made me cry and made me very stressed out. However, then we chatted with our genetic specialist and found out that the NIPTS test has a very high false positive rate for Turner's. So unlike other things where it is very accurate, for Turner's, the false positive rate tends to be between 60 to 70%, which means that a lot more people have a false positive than a positive positive. So if you're flagged high risk for Turner's on a NIPTS, there's still a low likelihood that your fetus actually has Turner's. So that was really comforting to know. It was still stressful and scary, but that was definitely something that was very comforting to find out, especially since going in and getting the NIPTS is so routine, and it's just not a lot of people talk about the accuracy rate for some of these more rare conditions. The more I talked to my genetic specialist and the more I started looking into things myself after we got flagged, the more stories I started seeing of other people who'd been in a similar situation where they'd gotten a really scary result and then everything was fine. And that nobody had talked to them beforehand about the accuracy rate. I saw scary stories about people who ended up terminating pregnancies based off a false positive, and it's just one of those things where I decided that no matter how our amniocentesis shook out, whether or not we ended up truly having a baby with Turner's or if our baby was going to be fine, I wanted to share that experience so that other people knew if you're newly pregnant or you're trying to get pregnant, kind of like what that full experience is, because I felt like nobody prepared me at all for the emotional experience of potentially having a false positive on a NIPTS. And I just wanted to put that out there because I feel like the more stories that are out there like that, the more information people have, the more you don't feel alone if something happens. And it just, reading and hearing other people's stories was life-saving for me. Like, I was so scared and I was so overwhelmed and I was so worried that hearing other people's stories and hearing about other people's false positives was like something that kept me going for weeks, because we found out at week 13, but then we couldn't schedule the amniocentesis until week 16 because 13 weeks, 14 weeks is still a little too young to be able to do an amniocentesis. So we had like 2-3 weeks that we were sitting around not knowing if our baby was going to be okay, and hearing other people's stories was one of the things that kept me feeling positive and upbeat. And knowing certain things like the fact that most of those fetuses that are miscarried with Turner's miscarried in the first trimester, so the fact that we made it to the second trimester was a good sign. Very common for babies to have with Turner's to have heart issues. So the fact that the heartbeat had been strong on all of our scans was a comforting and really good sign, and the geneticist and our doctor felt really good about all of those things. So those things helped keep me through. And then we were waiting for our results on when we turned week 17, like the day that I became 17 weeks. It was a Friday morning. that was the day that they'd said that we were most likely going to get the results coming in. Like, it wouldn't be before that, it could be after that, but they thought that they would probably come in that Friday. So I woke up that Friday really, really excited. I'd done my 16-week checkup with my doctor and listened to heartbeat again a couple days earlier, and we'd had a conversation about what the recommendations are, you know, what things were going in our favor, what things she felt we should be positive about, other things we should know and to take into consideration, because after we get the test results, you know, we were going to need to have conversations about what happens next or what we should do next. And that would have been on Wednesday. Friday morning I woke up, big day, 17 weeks, hoping to hear news about our baby. And that was also the Friday that I woke up to the headline that the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade. I happen to live in Oregon. I have very, very good insurance. I am a person who just is very lucky and is in a position of being very privileged. So even though this happened, I personally, you know, if worst case happens, if I knew that, like, if we got bad news that day, if the baby had died in me, because I'd already talked to my doctor about what would happen with that. Remember, they're like, if the baby becomes stillborn, you know, I would have to have an operation to have it out because it's far enough along that my body's not going to do that without help. So I knew that no matter what the results came, if we got the worst case scenario, if the worst case scenario happened, that I would be in a position to do something, where I would be in a position to still be having that conversation with my doctor. I'd be in a position to do what is the best thing for my health if my baby dies inside of me. It felt so weird, and it felt so much more emotional waiting for that news and waiting to find out what's happening with my baby, knowing that so many other people in the country no longer have the ability to have that conversation, or are going to have to find somewhere else to get care, or just don't have those same options that I have, because I happen to live in a state where abortion rights are protected, and that is not the case for so many people anymore. But it just added a totally different emotional aspect to what was already going to be a bit of a crazy day waiting for news. Just weird timing to me, like the timing of women's reproductive rights being stripped away from them in America on the day that I was waiting to find out whether or not my baby was at high risk of dying, or if my baby was totally fine. It just really, really hit me hard. We found out that it was fine. We got really good news. Our baby is fine. So we are now telling people. I finally get to feel excited, because I had that moment where I was really excited when we found out that we were pregnant. I had a little bit of that time when I started feeling normal again, and I was starting to feel excited about the idea of sharing the news and telling people. And then I felt like that excitement got stripped away from me when we got really bad news from the test results, and I was stressed and I had no idea what was going to happen. And getting that positive news, it made me feel like it was truly okay to be excited about my baby. Like we'd made it through some pretty big hurdles, and now I get to just be excited and enjoy the parts that come next. Now we get to look at baby clothes and buy cute things and plan the nursery, which we have, I'll talk about that more in a different video, but we have already started doing stuff, buying furniture, because things are back ordered. So we are planning ahead, getting to like do some of the things that are really exciting, being able to like take photos with my husband, and for us to like tell people finally and like let everybody know that we were pregnant and share that big news. I finally felt like it was okay to do it, and I finally felt okay to be happy about my baby. I mean, things can always go wrong later on, it happens, but we've made it through some really big hurdles, and it finally feels like we can breathe and relax and enjoy pregnancy, which I'm excited for because my first trimester was so rough. And then we had the beginning of the second trimester we spent being worried about the baby because of having the negative experience with the NIPTS because of getting that false positive with the NIPTS. Still get a NIPTS test. I would do it again if we got pregnant again. It's still good to do, but like knowing it was a very, very stressful and overwhelming experience to go through for us because we got a false positive flag. But because of all that stuff, you know, like I didn't really enjoy the beginning of being pregnant either. Of my second trimester, that moment when I started to feel more normal, I didn't really feel like I get to stop and really enjoy that because I was so worried. So now I feel like I can actually take a moment and enjoy a bit of pregnancy. I'm feeling more normal. I'm starting to have a bump. Like because I tend to wear like high-waisted shorts, and so many of my shorts and skirts like have like ties and stuff that would go right across like the part where I'm the biggest, and they're like, yeah, they're not pregnancy friendly. I did not have a lot of pregnancy friendly clothes, and I've been living in the few things that fit very, very comfortably and like oversized shirts because I've got a bit of a bump going at 18 weeks. So being able to enjoy that stuff and enjoy pregnancy and all the things and all the excitement before I get closer to the end where you're just big and you feel uncomfortable for other reasons. I'm not going to show you everything that we've gotten. I'm going to wait into a different video because this one's gotten really big because I wanted to talk about both my first trimester experience and the NIPTS experience. I did want to show you one little thing. The very first thing we bought for our baby when we were in France, before we knew what the sex of the baby was, it was something gender neutral, but we wanted to bring something home from France for the baby because we won't make it back to France before the baby's born. So we picked out this little outfit. We got it to be about 6 months, so that because the baby's due in the winter, so we're thinking around 6 months, that's when the weather is going to be a bit nicer. And this is a pretty light fabric, so like a little onesie bodysuit underneath it would be really cute. And we just thought it was adorable, and we happened to find it at a vendor in Valence at the market, and we just thought her stuff was so cute. This little artist who makes baby clothes. And so this is what we got. We got it. It's our very first thing we ever bought for our baby. We've been buying more things, and I'll go over that later. But that's it. That was my news. I know this was a really long video, so if you made it all the way through, thank you. I hope this was helpful. Please give it a thumbs up, leave comments if you also had an experience with a NIPTS test, or if you had awful first trimester experience. Let me know. I love reading other people's stories, and I will see you in the next video.